and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and what a big weekend of fights we just had on both sides of the Atlantic. Here in the UK, in London, England, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium played host to a huge rematch, an epic rematch, and possibly the last bout in the epic rivalry between the Eubanks and the Benns, as Chris Eubank Jr. took on Conor Benn in that epic return fight at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And then across the pond at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, played host to UFC 322. 2 championship belts were on the line. 1 champion retained, 1 champion captured his second world title on a night absolutely packed with action at Madison Square Garden. We'll break it all down right here on this week's episode of the podcast. But before we move on, give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow us on all the socials at Simon Head Sport for me across all social platforms, at RDX Sports on Twitter, at RDX_sports on Instagram and Threads as well. Make sure you're following across all these different platforms so you never miss what we're doing here at RDX Sports. But let's get this underway. A huge weekend of fights, a great night in London, England at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, the rematch. How was it going to go? It was billed as unfinished business. The wrap-up that we put on the RDX Sports blog was finished business, because you could not have got a more emphatic way to end a rivalry than what we saw on Saturday night, because Conor Benn absolutely dominated from bell to bell. 12 rounds. I scored the fight as we went along, round by round, and I gave Conor Benn each and every one of those 12 rounds. I was absolutely gobsmacked that there was one scorecard that gave Chris Eubank Jr. 4 consecutive rounds during that fight, which I honestly don't know what that judge was watching. I think his name was Latham, the judge. But my goodness, what a fight from Conor Benn. And the reason why it was so impressive was because he looked like a completely different fighter to the one we saw in the first meeting. All bombast and hellfire and brimstone and all that sort of stuff in the first fight. Fighting with his heart rather than his head. Going for the knockout with every punch. Loads of winging hooks. Not a lot of setup shots. Just barreling in. Just trying to land big shots on Chris Eubank Jr. And he really did take it out of Chris Eubank Jr. in that first fight. But as the fight wore on, Eubank Jr.'s superior boxing began to take over, and in the end it was he who ran out the victor. However, in the rematch, everything was different. For a start, Eubank Jr., who failed to make weight for the first bout, made weight for the second bout, but perhaps took too much weight off. He came in lighter than Conor Benn, which raised eyebrows, because this is a man who clearly had to lose a lot of weight to make 160 pounds. He did so, but the problem with the fight was he just looked weight drained from start to finish. He looked like a man who'd had a bad weight cut. He looked like a man who wasn't in there at 100% fitness. You see it a lot in MMA because there's so much weight cutting in MMA. You see it much more regularly. Fighters that have a bad weight cut, you really see it on fight night. They look just like an empty shell of themselves when they're in there. And you really see it when they start shipping some punishment, especially to the body. And we saw that with Chris Eubank Jr. on Saturday night. Conor Benn, for a start, operated with a jab. We barely saw him throw a jab in the first fight. The second fight was all about him working behind his jab. But the other thing that was really crucial in that matchup was his investment in the body. I think he knew from the first fight that Eubank Jr. could be hurt or depleted to the body, and knowing the sort of weight cut that Eubank would have had to have undergone to make the weight as quote unquote comfortably as he did on the scale, there was definitely a target there, and definitely part of the game plan. Tony Sims cooking up a great game plan and making sure that Conor Benn was 100% on point for fight night in London. What a performance. What a great performance from Conor Benn, who has been through the mill over the years with the anti-doping test and the subsequent legal battles and the back and forth with the commissions and appeals and you know, it's been a hell of a time for him, and for him to have emerged from that and to get the win that he got in a fight that most people thought Chris Eubank Jr. was going to win the fight, possibly more decisively than the first one. A lot of people thought that Eubank Jr. would actually get the stoppage win second time around. It was Conor Benn who looked the better fighter, comfortably the better fighter. He'd built his body up in between fights. He looked much more like he was in a natural weight class. He didn't look undersized in terms of his body composition this time. He didn't look like a lighter fighter just fighting at a higher weight. He just looked like a slightly smaller fighter, but he had the muscle packed on, and he'd filled out into his weight class. That combined with a great game plan, operating the jab, working the body consistently, all added up to be an incredible performance on the night from Conor Benn. As I say, he won every round on my scorecard. The last round was the exclamation point, the cherry on top of the cake. 2 knockdowns. And had there been another minute left in that round, we might well have seen a stoppage in the final round. It really was all one-way traffic in the fight. And when Conor really did land on him in the final round, it looked like he might get that stoppage. But all credit to Chris Eubank Jr., who has got a hell of a fighting heart on him, because he looked like, as I say, he did not look like the same guy who we saw in the first fight. He did not look like the same guy who went on to win a version of the world title. There were things that weren't quite right with Chris Eubank Jr. on that fight, whether age had caught up to him, whether it was one tough weight cut too many, whatever it might be. I hope that he's healthy now, and I hope he's resting and recuperating, and we'll see what happens next for him in his career. Will he continue? Does he need to continue? I would have thought the payday that he got from the last 2 fights, particularly this one, given that he had to give up a fair chunk of change last time after missing weight. Hopefully he's in a position now where he doesn't need to fight, and he can make that decision to call time on his career if he so wishes. But we shall see. We'll see what he wants to do with his career. Whatever he does, I think he needs to do it at super middleweight rather than middleweight. He looked very, very dry and very, very tight and weight drained at 160. So I would expect him to move back up to super middleweight, where he can be a lot healthier and still be a factor and maybe be in some big fights still. So we'll see what happens with him. As for Conor Benn, he's looking to drop down. He's looking to get back down. I think they're talking about moving him back down to 147. Whether he takes a transitional fight to work his way down there, whether he goes straight back down, remains to be seen. There are some big title fights waiting for him. Barrios, the WBC champion, is the one that he wants, because that's the belt that his dad had back in the day, the WBC belt. So I think he wants to win a WBC belt like his father did. The easiest fight to book would be Lewis Crocker. And from a domestic standpoint, certainly on this side of the pond, that would be a massive fight. That would be a massive fight. If you did that fight in Dublin, sorry, not in Dublin, in Belfast, that would be absolutely huge. Lewis Crocker in Belfast against Conor Benn would be a massive event. You could also hold that fight in London, and that will attract a big crowd as well. But maximum impact, given that he's challenging, I think would be for him to go to Belfast and take on Lewis Crocker for the belt. But as I say, Barrios is the fight he wants. There are other fights out there as well. Rolly Romero is an option. Devin Haney could potentially be an option. Yeah, there's lots going on. And Conor Benn is now in prime position to be able to take advantage of what looks like a pretty crowded division, where there are lots of big fights potentially on the table for him. And while he isn't a world champion, he does certainly bring an audience with him. And Eddie Hearn said that Conor Benn is the fight for any of these fighters, which you would say, being he's promoter. But I think a Conor Benn fight against any of the champions would certainly be a worthy next step for Conor Benn. But great performance, and he showed that he can fight with his head rather than his heart on Saturday. It was all heart last time out. This time he fought with his brain, and did really well. Didn't get impatient, didn't get cocky. even though he was clearly winning the fight. And did a really good job. Conor Benn moving on to big things, probably at 147 pounds. And we look forward to seeing what's happening for him. Chris Eubank Jr., we wish him all the best. Hope he rests and recovers, and we'll see what happens in his fighting future. But that fighting series, that those two fights, the build up to the pair of them, and just the narrative that ran through it was just, boxing almost at its best. The way the promotion went, the storyline, it pulled everybody in, especially leading it up to that first fight. The lead up to that first fight was unlike almost any fight I can remember since the old Benn and Eubank days, back in the 1980s or early 1990s. I remember them being on TV together on ITV and sitting with their back to each other almost. Nigel Benn didn't want any part of Chris Eubank, and it's nice to see the pair of them sort of cordial now after all of that. I know that the rivalry still burns between the two families, but I think now we've seen enough for that to all be buried now, and with both fighters looking to start young families as well. Chris Eubank Jr. announcing that he's due to be the father of twin boys soon, so congrats to him. They've got other things in mind as well moving forward, but Conor Benn is by far the younger fighter. He still has a lot of his fighting career left, and there's a world title to be won. So all the best to him. We'll see what happens down the line and who he'll get booked against. If they can do the Barrios fight, I think that will be the first choice. If for any reason they can't do the Barrios fight straight away, the Lewis Crocker fight is sitting there just waiting to be booked. And that would be a huge, huge fight on this side of the pond. But great stuff from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Another great atmosphere, a great occasion, and a career-defining performance by Conor Benn. We had the Queensberry Rules of Boxing in London, England on Saturday night. Then a little bit later on in the evening, we had the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts as UFC 322 took place at the Mecca of combat sports, Madison Square Garden in New York City, hosting UFC 322, a stacked card of fights, and the fight card delivered in different ways. We'll start with the two fights at the top of the card, where, I'll be honest, probably two of the least interesting fights to watch, or least entertaining fights to watch, but both had very compelling narratives and very compelling storylines and takeaways to take from them. So let's start with the main event. Jack Della Maddalena headed into that main event as the reigning UFC welterweight champion. He dominated Belal Muhammad to win that belt, and his first title defense came against the former lightweight world champion Islam Makhachev, who had moved up from lightweight, having dominated at 155 pounds in a bid to become a two-division world champion. Not a simultaneous two-division world champion. He relinquished his title to move up, but nonetheless looking for two-division glory, and he got it. And he got it easily, let's be honest. Islam Makhachev utterly dominated Jack Della Maddalena for 5 rounds. 50-45 scores across the board, a complete shutout on all 3 scorecards. And it looked like Jack Della Maddalena had picked up an injury, possibly a leg injury due to early calf kicks, I think, during that fight. But that notwithstanding, he had nothing for Islam Makhachev. Nothing at all. His strike, he had a good start to the first round where he looked like he was landing some decent stuff. But as soon as Makhachev hit the first takedown, everything changed. After that, JDM's punches almost looked like arm punches. He didn't seem to be putting any meat behind them in the way that we're used to seeing. He wasn't digging into his shots. I think maybe he was worried about the takedown. He didn't want to overly commit. Very front foot heavy when he's fighting, stepping in, looking to throw his shots. And he's got a very wide bladed stance going forward. And that front leg was just a sitting duck for Islam Makhachev, who just whipped it up almost at will during that fight. I think he landed 5 of 6 takedowns in that fight. It was a crazy fight in terms of just how easily the former lightweight champion of the world handled the reigning welterweight champion of the world. And Islam Makhachev just did what he does. He just took him down and bullied him, big brothered him for 5 rounds. Was it pretty to watch? No. Was it exciting to watch? No. This is not, for all of his obvious brilliance as a fighter, Islam Makhachev is not the most entertaining guy to watch. And that's kind of the tricky thing with him. He's so dominant, but he's dominant in a way that isn't massively entertaining unless you are a real connoisseur of the sport and you can appreciate the finer details of what he actually does to get the fight to the mat. But he didn't seem to be pursuing the finish as strongly as a guy with the level of dominance that he had probably should have been. I do think he fights quite safe when he gets the fight to the ground. But this is the thing. You can critique that and you can offer an opinion that maybe he should do more. But it's really not on him to do more. It's on his opponents to actually do something about him. He's winning these fights. It's not lay and pray. He's not just laying and praying. He's doing a bit more than that. So you can't criticize him for lay and pray tactics. He is active, but he could potentially be finishing more fights than he does. I mean, he's got a great arm triangle, and he did try in the first couple of rounds to see if he could lock up Jack Della Maddalena in an arm triangle. He was trying some submissions, but I don't know. He didn't. He could have switched to strikes when he was on the mat, but he was so dominant. He was so dominant in that fight, and JDM had nothing for him. I think looking at it as a fight that it was as one-sided as it was, the one disappointment was that he didn't get the finish. But what we can't debate is just how dominant Islam Makhachev is. And I'll tell you this as well. I think he's better at welterweight, or he's going to be better at welterweight than he was at lightweight. He looks so much healthier. He didn't look in any way weight drained. He looked big and strong at the weight. And I think that's only going to make him more dangerous. And I also think, and I think Luke Thomas might have referred to this in one of his videos post-fight, and I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think Islam Makhachev has surpassed Khabib Nurmagomedov in terms of achievements. The only thing that Khabib has over Islam is that O on his record, and that's it. But if you look at the caliber of fighters that Islam has fought versus the caliber of fighters that Khabib has fought, Islam has fought more elite level competition than Khabib has. A lot of that run was against mid-tier fighters until he got to the top. He had a couple of fights at the top and then bowed out with his 29-0 record. Islam Makhachev has been fighting elite level guys for a good few years now. He's defended his title at lightweight a host of times. He's now captured a title in another weight class. And for all of the talent that there is at 170 pounds, and there is a lot, and we're going to talk about some of it on the podcast here, it is entirely conceivable that Islam Makhachev will run the table and beat each and every one of those guys. He is that good. He is that good. Is he the most exciting? No. Is he the best? Yeah, he is. So, and this is the thing. Everybody wants to see their fight. Everyone wants their fighters to fight like Carlos Prates, right? They want him to get in there, go hell for leather for a knockout, flamboyant striking style, spectacular highlight reel KOs every time they step into the cage. But that doesn't win you fights all the time. You've got to be able to do the dirty stuff as well. You've got to get, you've got to be good with the grappling. You've got to be able to be offensively excellent on the ground, and you've got to be able to shut your opponents down. Islam Makhachev does that better than any fighter, possibly ever, in the UFC. The only one I could think of who has the ability to shut down a fighter and be that dominant is Georges St. Pierre, who is probably for me the best of all time. When you consider everything about mixed martial arts, I think he may be the most complete fighter the UFC has ever had. Islam Makhachev is entering that sort of territory. And I think if he has a lengthy run at welterweight, I think he has what it takes to surpass GSP and be the numero uno and surpass John Jones and be the numero uno of all time. I think he's that good. I'd love to see him finish even more fights. He finishes them on the floor with submissions. I'd love to see more variety, maybe a bit more on the feet. But you've got to also be smart. Jack Della Maddalena is a knockout artist with heavy, heavy hands. Islam Makhachev is giving his opponent too much of a chance if he's just going to stand in front of him and throw strikes. He wins the fights. His job is to win, and he does it better than anybody in the UFC. So he's outstanding. And while there will be critics of his style, you can't question how good the guy is. And he is, for me, the best pound for pound fighter in the world. Ilia Topuria will contest that. And he is certainly very, very good. But I think talent for talent, that's an interesting conversation to have. But if you look at the body of work of both men, I think Islam's body of work stands above Ilya's as things stand right now. Now, things might change as time goes on. But right now, I think Islam Makhachev is the number one pound for pound fighter on the planet. And I'm really excited for what could come next for him, because he is now the champion in one of the most interesting, exciting weight classes in the UFC. And we will touch upon that in a second. But before we do that, let's talk about the co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili in a fight that everybody, myself included, was really, really pumped to see. The number one versus number two in the women's pound for pound list. Zhang Weili relinquishes a strawweight belt, moves up to challenge the queen of the flyweights, Valentina Shevchenko, for the 125 pound title. How would this go? How would this go? Who would come out of this with that pound for pound number one tag? Could Zhang Weili get the job done and be the one to dethrone Valentina Shevchenko? The answer emphatically was no. Valentina Shevchenko proved the often disproved notion that a good big un will beat a good little un. And while Valentina Shevchenko is not what you would call a big un, she's bigger than Zhang Weili. She's naturally bigger. And you could see that on fight night at Madison Square Garden. Zhang Weili is very, very quick. And I think a lot of people thought that her speed will play to her advantage on fight night. It didn't. Valentina Shevchenko was every bit as quick as Zhang was. Her striking was so sharp on the feet. But the difference maker, just as we talked about in the main event, Valentina Shevchenko had the ability to take Zhang Weili down almost at will. And when she got her down, Zhang Weili could not get back up. And Shevchenko dominated. Had her in the crucifix position once or twice in the fight. And again, in a fight where she was dominating so much, could she have potentially pushed harder for the finish? Maybe. But she was just so dominant in that fight. And they were very, very similar matchups in many regards, in that the way that they panned out. The difference in quality, you could say that Valentina Shevchenko was facing a smaller opponent, whereas Makhachev was facing a larger opponent. But then Shevchenko was facing a pound for pound great of the sport in Zhang Weili, much as she is, whereas Makhachev was fighting a champion in his first title defense. So there are differences in the two title defenses, but the way they both went about their business was very, very similar, which was get them comfy on the feet, take them down, and just boss it on the mat. Again, not the most exciting fight to watch, and it was a shame that, really, for a card that delivered so much incredible action, the two title fights that finished the night were a little bit disappointing in that they weren't competitive. They were very one-sided, and the action wasn't enormously entertaining for the crowd watching. While you can appreciate the dominance and the technique, it wasn't edge of the seat stuff at all. And that was a bit of a shame, because the event, was outstanding. It's just I've talked about this with some of my colleagues in the media space in this sport many times, where you can look at the results on a fight card, and if you just rearrange when the fights took place on the night, people will come away feeling very differently about an event. And it's possible that some people would have come away feeling a little bit disappointed with the last two fights on the card, because they were just so lopsided and there wasn't a lot of excitement. But before that, we had a hell of a lot of excitement and some of the best finishes we've seen in the UFC in 2025. So while Islam Makhachev dominated to win the welterweight title, Valentina Shevchenko dominated to retain the women's flyweight title. The rest of the main card was absolute fireworks. And let's talk about it right now. 2 welterweight bouts, 1 lightweight matchup, and they all delivered stunning finishes. Michael Morales taking on Sean Brady. Sean Brady ranked number 2 in the world. And I'll put it out there now. Sean Brady, I feel really sorry for Sean Brady. I know he doesn't want people to feel sorry for him, but I feel it's hard not to feel sorry for Sean Brady. He had done everything that he needed to do to earn a shot at the welterweight title, positioned himself as the number 2 ranked contender in the division, and was arguably next in line to fight Jack Della Maddalena for the title. But then Islam Makhachev moves up from lightweight, a bigger name, a more decorated resume, and a guy who, from a promotional standpoint, was always going to get the shot over Sean Brady. Sean Brady's got the resume in the division, but Islam Makhachev has got the star power, the name power, and the championship credentials from the lightweight division. So Makhachev gets the shot. In the meantime, Sean Brady knows he needs to fight because this is a division stacked with contenders. He can't sit still. You sit still, you're going backwards in this weight class. He has to fight. He gets Michael Morales, undefeated Ecuadorian contender, and perhaps the fighter that had the most questions being asked about him headed into this fight, insofar as we knew the credentials of most of the other contenders in the division. You kind of know from seeing how they fare. Michael Morales has been on the way up. He's the youngest contender of the bunch, but he hadn't faced a truly, truly elite contender yet. But against Sean Brady, he did. And against Sean Brady, he looked absolutely flipping incredible. He looked amazing. Great performance from Michael Morales. He was facing, he was a lot bigger and taller and rangier than Brady. He's very powerful, very stocky. And we knew that Brady was going to want to take the fight to the mat. Morales knew that. Morales has got excellent defensive wrestling. He's got excellent wrestling, full stop. But he knew what he needed to protect himself from. And his stance was really quite remarkable, how low he was crouching in the stand-up position, standing up ready to strike, but really with the hips dipped in a just making that journey to a takedown, to stuffing a takedown a little bit quicker, because he was obviously a little bit closer to the mat. And he stuffed the takedowns from Sean Brady and then lit him up with the hands. And boy, did he light him up. Lit him up like a Christmas tree. Absolutely brilliant stuff from Michael Morales. Hurt Brady on 2 separate occasions and just swarmed him with strikes. Brady somehow managed to survive the first flurry. Tried to get out into the open, get away from Morales. Morales wouldn't let him have the space. Chased him across the cage, landed more heavy shots, and eventually finished him at the 3:27 mark in the first round. That was as emphatic a performance as you could have wanted. And Michael Morales, fresh off what we had just seen from Carlos Prates, more of whom in a minute, Michael Morales was under a little bit of pressure because he needed to A, get the win, but B, do it in emphatic style, given what had happened 15 minutes earlier. And he did it. He delivered absolutely everything that was required. And for my money, he's the front runner. He needs to be the guy currently, as we're sitting here today on Monday, November 17th. He, for me, is the top contender to challenge Islam Makhachev in 2026 when he makes his first title defense. That might change. We have things coming this weekend. But as things stand right now, he is, for me, the number 1 contender. That was such a good performance from him, and one that I think has seen any questions that might be lingering about him. Because when you have an undefeated fighter but they've not faced elite names, it's like, okay, he hasn't found his level yet. When he hits the elite level, then he'll get really tested, and then we'll see what he's got. Well, he went in there with a guy who absolutely dominated Leon Edwards, the former champion, last time out, and has been on a great run, a really great run. And Morales just handled him in less than 4 minutes. Great performance for him. He is, for my money at least, the number 1 contender as things stand right now for the welterweight title heading into 2026. The reason why Michael Morales needed to pull something big out of the bag was because Carlos Prates, the nightmare from the Fighting Nerds, produced a jaw-dropping KO of Leon Edwards on the main card. Leon had never been knocked out before in his mixed martial arts career, and he was coming into this fight with a point to prove and needing to get a victory. He lost his title to Belal Muhammad in an uncharacteristically sort of subpar performance at UFC 304 in Manchester, which, if you remember, was held in the middle of the night. And it really did seem to affect Leon. Didn't affect Belal, though. Belal went out there and did the business on him and got the decision and won the title. Leon then wanted to bounce back at UFC London. He was all set to face Jack Della Maddalena in a matchup against a different kind of fighter, against a striker. And then at relatively short notice, that bout was switched. Della Maddalena ended up challenging for the title. And in his place came Sean Brady, a completely different matchup for Leon Edwards. He went from a striker to an out-and-out grappler, and probably the best grappler in the division. And Sean Brady came in and dominated in London in March and eventually submitted Edwards in the 4th round. A really, really impressive performance from Brady. But what it meant was, for the first time in Edwards' career, he lost 2 straight. We'd never seen him lose 2 in a row. So he lost his title and then he lost his comeback fight. He needed a win on Saturday against Carlos Prates in a match that had very little peril for him in terms of dealing with yet more wrestling and grappling. This was going to be a stand-up fight for as long as Leon wanted it to be standing. And Leon looked to work some clinch work against the cage, trying to sap Carlos Prates' gas tank a little bit. But Prates dealt with it quite comfortably. And then when the fight was in the open, Prates just absolutely flattened him with a peach of a straight left. We've never seen Leon. We've seen Leon get stunned a couple of times. He got rocked by Nate Diaz late on in that fight. But this one was a one-shot knockout. Absolutely out cold. Vicious knockout. And it begs a question, what's next for Leon Edwards? Because he's lost 3 in a row. All against elite opposition. So the whole "you lose 3 in a row, you should be cut from the UFC" narrative that a lot of people seem to run with online doesn't apply here, because he's lost 3 in a row, yes. But look who he's lost to. He lost to Sean Brady, who was basically the top contender in the division heading into the weekend. He'd lost the title to Belal Muhammad, so that was a championship fight. And now he's lost to Carlos Prates, who is undeniably a championship contender at 170 pounds. So he's not losing to mugs, but he has lost 3 in a row. So I would imagine Edwards will take a bit of time out. We'll look to rest and recuperate, and maybe we'll look to come back in March on home soil. It'd be interesting to see, A, if that is what he does, and B, if he does, who he comes back against. Michael Venom Page would be a natural pick if you want an all-British matchup at 170 pounds. That would be doable. Depending on how Ian Machado Gary does this weekend against Belal Muhammad, we could have that. We could even have a rematch with Belal. So who knows? Who knows? But I think it's a real crossroads time for Leon Edwards. As for Carlos Prates, he lost to Ian Machado Gary earlier this year on the scorecards, and it was like, has Carlos Prates found his level against a guy with super high fight IQ, excellent defensive skills? He was able to prevent Prates from putting him away, and people were wondering, is that if we kind of hit the ceiling for Carlos Prates? And the answer was an emphatic no, because after that fight he came back, fought Jeff Neal, spinning back elbow knockout, stunning stuff, and then against the former champion in Leon Edwards, becomes the first man to knock him out, and he knocked him out cold. It wasn't one of these sort of, wasn't like a flash shot and it was, question mark whether it was a proper knockout. This was a proper knockout. This is a knockout of the year type knockout. There's been so many great knockouts in 2025. This is going to make the highlight reel for sure. And Prates, in most other weight classes, after a win like that against a guy like that, would probably be in for the belt next. I don't think he's going to be in for the belt next. Or at least I don't think he should be. because there are other contenders in there ahead of him. One of which being Michael Morales, who saw that performance and then elevated himself above it by defeating the number 2 contender Sean Brady. So much going on at 170 pounds. It really is excellent stuff to watch. And the welterweight division is very, very exciting. And we'll talk about that other fight I just hinted at coming up this weekend in a little bit. But just to round off the main card results, France's Benoit Saint Denis took on Beneil Dariush in what was originally scheduled to be a lightweight contest. It ended up being a catchweight bout after Beneil uncharacteristically wasn't able to make weight. Came in 1.2 pounds over the limit, coming in at 157.2. And I don't know whether that weight cut played any factor in what happened, but Benoit Saint Denis knocked out Beneil Dariush in 16 seconds. 16 seconds. Stunning stuff from the Frenchman, who he's building back after he had an incredible rise up the division, faced Dustin Poirier, and it was a bit too much too early for him. Got a bit overzealous and got beat. But he is a serious threat at 155 pounds. He's not ranked in that upper bracket yet, but that win over Beneil Dariush will put him right on the cusp of the top 5. And his next bout should be against top 5 opposition. So really looking forward to what happens with Benoit next. He could be a candidate to fight in London. I'm not sure when they're looking to book the next Paris card. But he could main event. And it's just a case of who he main events against. But depending on when that is, then if it's early sort of Q1, if he's in Q1 next year, Benoit Saint Denis could be main event in Paris, which would be quite something. But that was a great performance from him, 16 seconds. And despite the fact we saw those 3 incredible finishes, I don't think any of them would have been the best finish of the night, because the best finish of the night came in a featured prelim. Bo Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira. And Bo Nickel with a absolute stunner. He channeled his inner Mirko Cro Cop. Who knew he had that? Head kick knockout of Rodolfo Vieira midway through the final round, capping off a really comprehensive performance from Bo Nickel. Looked really good on the feet, very fluid. He's got that wrestling in his back pocket, but showcased his strikes in spectacular fashion to get the job done. And wow, what a performance. But to put it into some context as well, Bo Nickel fought at Madison Square Garden last year against Paul Craig, and looked a bit wary to go to the mat with Craig, and it ended up being a bit of a low-level kickboxing match between the two. Not much happened. The crowd who had been fed all of the Bo Nickel hype in the lead up to the fight, of which there's been a lot ever since Bo Nickel announced he was going to go to MMA. There's probably not been a more hyped prospect since Aaron Pico. Bo Nickel has been getting the full treatment when it comes to the hype. He's a confident man himself. He wasn't going to play any of it down, but he doesn't. I wouldn't say he's overplaying his talents or anything. So I don't think he's fed into it overly much. But I think when people try to tell you what to think, or people try to tell you this guy's really good, you need to watch this guy, he's really good, and then he doesn't do what you've been told he's going to do, some people don't react well to that. And the New York crowd last year were chanting overrated at Bo Nickel after his win, or during his win. And it was a real moment. It was like, wow, okay. This all-American kid coming out of the college system, one of the great wrestlers from the United States, transitioning to mixed martial arts and looking like a real talent, getting just taken apart by the New York crowd for the absolute crime of just not being brilliant on one night and just doing enough to win, while he's still learning his trade on the sport's biggest stage, getting absolutely eviscerated by the crowd. Chance of overrated. He comes back to Madison Square Garden on Saturday and knocks out Rodolfo Vieira. Great performance from start to finish as well. And credit to him, sticks the fingers up at the crowd and he's like, well, look, you either love me or you don't. Take your pick. You know, you're either booing me or you're cheering me, but, you know, make your mind up, pick a side. And I like that. I like the fact that he's got a little bit of edge about him, and clearly that the stuff that happened, he was getting a few boos during the fight because the action slowed once or twice. But I mean, really, the the reaction to Bo, I think, is a bit OTT, and he went out there and did the best thing he could possibly have done. He showed just how good he can be, and did it with his skills. And what a performance! Head kick knockout. 2 minutes 24 was the official time in the third round, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they matchmake Bo Nickel heading into 2026, because I still don't think he's ready to be a contender yet, but I do know that the core skills are definitely there, and I think it just needs some more continued refinement, and that will come with more reps and more fights. And I think as long as I don't throw him too high too quickly, he'll become a contender at 185 pounds for sure. But we'll see how he goes. Rodolfo Vieira was a good next opponent for him. Great finish. Now we see what's next for Bo Nickel. But great performance from him. Other notables on the card. Gregory Rodriguez versus Roman Kopylov was a banger. That went the distance. Rodriguez won that on the cards. Erin Blanchfield got a little bit of revenge on Tracy Cortez. Tracy Cortez defeated Erin Blanchfield back in Invicta many moons ago, and immediately got the call up for the Contender Series as a result. Erin Blanchfield had to stick around for a few more fights. She eventually made her way into the UFC. And then on Saturday night, they finally rematched as a pair of highly ranked contenders at flyweight, and Blanchfield getting the job done. Wrestling and submissions. Just wrestling and submissions. When the fight was standing, it was pretty even. Cortez may be edging the striking, but when it came to the ground stuff, it was all Erin Blanchfield. Second round submission, 16 seconds left on the clock. Rear naked choke gets it done. She is very close to a title shot at 125 pounds. And the other fight I wanted to really shout out was the opening bout on the televised prelims. Ethan Ewing taking on Malcolm Wellmaker. Now, Malcolm Wellmaker, undefeated, hard-hitting, exciting rising prospect at 145 pounds. Lost his opponent with just a few days to go to fight night. In steps Ethan Ewing, who is the A1 Combat, which is Uriah Faber's promotion in San Jose, California. San Jose or Sacramento? Sacramento, I think. Ethan Ewing is the bantamweight, the interim bantamweight champion for that promotion. He won that belt last weekend. And then 1 week later, he's got his UFC debut on what was basically 3 days' notice, I think it was. Steps in against an undefeated prospect who's starting to get a little bit of hype. And he didn't dominate him, but he won in a clear fashion. There was no controversy about his victory whatsoever. Unanimous decision, 30-27 on one scorecard, which was totally justified, and 2 29-28s, which were also fair scorecards. He wins by unanimous decision. Amazing performance. Really, really amazing performance. And if he could do that against a highly touted featherweight prospect, how's he going to do if you move him back down to his actual weight class at 135 pounds and let him have a training camp? And let him know who he's fighting at the start of that training camp. Ethan Ewing, I think, is a possible contender at 135 pounds. I know we're early. But he looks like he's got all the tools to really make a dent at 135 pounds. Now, we know that the bantamweight division is stacked. It is a shark tank of a division. Another shark has just entered the tank. Let's put it like that. Ethan Ewing, I think, is going to be a lot of fun to watch at 135 pounds in 2026. Great performance from him. On the early prelims, couple of former CFFC stars getting the job done at the top of the early prelims. Carl Dorcas needing less than a minute to submit Gerald Meerschaert. If you can submit Gerald Meerschaert, that is a major feather in your cap. He is a legit jiu-jitsu black belt. Dorcas rocked him, then subbed him with a Darce choke. 50 seconds was all that took. And another grappler, Pat Sabatini, managed to get the unanimous decision win, shutout win on the scorecards, 30-27s across the board against Chepe Mariscal. Nasty cuts around his eye by the end of that fight. He's going to be in a lot of pain in the next few days. Cuts in both upper and lower eyelids. There were accusations of some gouging going on. But amazing performance from Sabatini. Gets the job done on the scorecards. Just to wrap things up, on the fight card, Fatima Klein defeats Angela Hill by unanimous decision at strawweight. Baisenga Susukayev, someone to keep an eye on for sure. Knockout of Eric McConaughey in the third round. And in the opening bout of the night, Matthias Camillo defeating Vyacheslav Borshev, Slava Claus as he likes to be known. But no ho 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 and presents for him because he lost on the scorecards 30-27, 30-27, 29-28. Amazing night of fights. There was no fight of the night. If they were going to give a fight of the night, I'd probably have given it to Ewing versus Wellmaker. I thought that was a really good fight. Performance of the night bonuses went to Michael Morales, Carlos Prates, Benoit Saint Denis, and Bo Nickel. No surprises for either or any of those. They were all deserving winners of that particular honour, and each of them go home with $50,000 in their back pocket. UFC 322 was a good night of fights. I know there was a bit of disappointment over the way the last two fights panned out, but that was a good night of fights at Madison Square Garden. All right, that's just about all we've got time for on the RDX Sports Podcast this week. We'll be back later this week to preview this weekend's big fight card in Doha in Qatar. Loaded fight card for that one. We'll give you a special preview episode for that fight night card a little bit later this week. But for now, enjoy the rest of your week. Don't forget to give us a follow on the socials at Simon Head Sport on all the social platforms, at RDX Sports on X, at RDX_sports on Instagram. And of course, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button on this video right here so you never miss an episode of the RDX Sports Podcast. Thanks for checking out the show this week. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back to talk to you about the upcoming show in Doha in a few days' time.